Thomas's ABC book. A is for all aboard. All aboard, calls Thomas the tank engine. B is for Birdie the bus. Birdie is Thomas's friend. Beep, beep. C is for coaches. Annie and Clarabelle are Thomas's coaches. D is for Diesel. Doesn't Diesel look grumpy today? E is for Edward. Edward, a kind engine, helps everyone. F is for freight cars. Trick-trock, say the silly freight cars. G is for Gordon. Gordon is a big, strong engine. Boop, boop. H is for Henry. Here comes Henry under the bridge. I is for important. Trains do important work. J is for James. James is going on an exciting journey. K is for kind. L is for little. Kind little Edward is careful with freight cars. Whoosh! M is for men. The men who drive the engine stand inside the cab. N is for new. Here's Henry with a new coat of paint. O is for old-fashioned. Toby the tram engine is old-fashioned but very helpful. P is for Percy. Percy is the little green engine. Beep, beep. Q is for quick. James, the red engine, comes to a quick stop. R is for rest. Thomas and Percy rest in the railway station. S is for Sir Topham Hatt. Sir Topham Hatt runs the railroad. T is for tracks. Terence tells Thomas about his tracks. U is for up. Up on the bridge, Thomas chugs along happily. V is for valley. Thomas climbs out of the valley up the steep hill. W is for whoosh. X is for express. Whoosh! Gordon, the big engine, pulls the express. Y is for yard. Z is for zip. Zip, zip. Thomas is busy in the yard, pushing and pulling. Isn't he a really useful engine? Thomas's color book. The engines of Sodor love color, and the island of Sodor is a very colorful place. Lucky engines. James is hauling bushels of crisp red apples. Jack says hello to Flynn, the fire engine. Marion greets Bill and Ben. Bill is carrying orange pumpkins. Molly is pushing a load of bright yellow sunflowers. Kevin can lend a hand if she needs repairs. Cranky lifts loads of green trees onto the trucks. Percy, Henry, and Emily carry them away. What is that on your truck, Edward? Asks Thomas. Edward is carrying a flock of beautiful blue peacocks. Look at those feathers. Charlie and Ryan are very busy. They are delivering big baskets of purple grapes. Toby gets to carry a big brown chocolate cake. It's the biggest cake ever baked on Sodor. It's for the Harwick Town Fair. It looks delicious. Hiro is pushing some beautiful black stallions to the horse show. Their coats are so shiny. Mavis is taking a load of big black boulders to the dinosaur park. They'll be part of an exhibit about volcanoes. Harold and Jeremy can zip around fluffy white clouds as they fly through the air. A flock of white seagulls follows their lead. Rosie is hauling sweet-smelling pink roses. Spencer has the biggest freight of all, a big gray elephant. Where do you think it's going? If you guessed the animal park, you're right. So many colors. Name them all. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, brown, black, pink, white, and gray. What a colorful day it has been on the island of Sodor. Now look around your neighborhood for colorful things. Thomas and Friends, Flynn Saves the Day. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. Percy rolls down the track. Uh-oh, Percy smells smoke. Oh no, Percy sees a fire. Thomas is in trouble. Who will save him? Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Percy finds Flynn. Flynn is a fire engine. Flynn is fast. Flynn is fearless. Flynn will save Thomas. Chuff, chuff, clang, clang. The engines hurry to help. Smoke swirls. Flames flash. The engines work together. Percy clears the track. Thomas is free. Flynn fights the fire. Whoosh goes the water. The flames flicker. They fizz. They fade. The fire is out. Thomas is safe. Good job, Flynn. Thank you, Percy. Thomas and Friends, Henry and the Elephant. Based on the Railway series by Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. Thomas left the yard. He went to run his own branch line. Henry and Gordon missed Thomas. With Thomas gone, there was more work to do. Henry and Gordon were cross. Henry grumbled as he pushed trucks. Gordon grumbled as he pulled coaches. One day, a circus came to town. Now the engines were even busier. Henry pushed the trucks. Gordon pulled the coaches. They did not grumble. Henry and Gordon liked the circus. The next day, Henry took workmen to a blocked tunnel. The workmen picked up their tools. Time to clear the line. They walked inside. Something big was in the tunnel. It would not move. It grunted. It was alive. They ran outside. The foreman had a plan. Henry could push trucks into the tunnel. Whoosh, said Henry. Henry did not like tunnels. He was scared. Henry pushed the trucks. They went into the dark tunnel. Bump. Henry pushed hard. The big, scary thing pushed back. Henry pushed harder. The big, scary thing pushed hardest. Henry inched backwards. First, Henry was pushed out of the tunnel. Then the trucks were pushed out. At last, they saw what was in the tunnel. It was an elephant, and he looked cross. He had run away from the circus. The workmen fed him and gave him lots of water. The elephant felt better. Henry felt better too. He let off steam. Whoosh! Henry's steam scared the elephant. Splash! Poor Henry. It was time to go home. Everyone laughed at Henry. An elephant pushed me and splashed me, Henry grumbled. But in the shed, Henry told his funny story. His friends laughed. This time, Henry laughed too. Thomas and Friends, Stuck in the Mud. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. Click, clack, click, clack. Thomas puffs down the track. Thomas finds an old engine. Hero is broken. Will he be sent to the scrapyard? No! Thomas will fix him. Uh-oh, here comes Spencer. I'm going to tell, says Spencer. Oh no, Hero needs help. Thomas puffs off to get help. Click, clack, click, clack. Thomas and Spencer race down the track. Splat! Spencer falls into the mud. Now Thomas must help 2 engines, he tells Sir Topham Hatt. Clang, clang, bang, bang. Hero is fixed. But who will help Spencer? Thomas is too small. Hero will. He huffs and puffs. He pulls Spencer out of the mud. Thank you, says Spencer. Hooray for Hero. Click, clack, click, clack. All the friends steam down the track. Gordon's new view. Gordon was big. Gordon was tall. Gordon liked his view from the yard. Gordon liked his view from the stations, too. He could see people. People could see him. Gordon, you must go to the new station, said Sir Topham Hatt. Gordon rushed to the new station. He stopped inside. There was no view. Gordon could not see the people. They could not see him. The next day, Gordon was busy. He pulled the express. He rushed to the docks. He raced back to the new station. He was in a hurry, but his brakes were stuck. He could not slow down. Crash! Gordon crashed into the bumper. Smash! Gordon smashed into the wall. Now people could see him, but Gordon could not see them. His eyes were shut tight. The breakdown train pulled Gordon back. Gordon, go to the works, said Sir Topham Hatt. When Gordon came back, he was fixed. The wall was fixed too. It had a new window. Gordon likes his new view. He can see people. And people can see him. Beep, beep. The Close Shave. The Close Shave, based on Railway Series by the Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. Thomas and Duck are friends. They are not friends with the troublesome trucks. They like to chug up hills. They like to zip down hills. One day, Duck was zipping down a hill. Hello, Thomas. Duck heard a warning whistle. Peep, peep. Trucks had run away from Thomas. Go, Duck! No trucks! The trucks bumped Duck. Mad Duck. Glad trucks. Duck and the trucks rushed down the hill. Duck saw the end of the line. Duck had to stop. Duck crashed into the barber shop. Sad Duck. Bad trucks. The barber was cross. Soapy Duck. Dopey trucks. I am sorry, said Duck. I had to stop the runaway trucks. No one was hurt. The shop could be fixed. Duck was a hero. Duck got cleaned up. The trucks got picked up. Duck had a close shave. Go, Train, Go, a companion book to Stop, Train, Stop. Here comes the judge in her big red hat. She has come to see the train show. Who will take the judge to the train show? Thomas will. Thomas will go. Thomas will take the judge to the show. Hurry, Thomas. Take me to the show. Take me there fast. Go, train, go. Clickety-clack, up the hill. Thomas the tank engine goes faster than fast. Screech! Go the brakes. Thomas goes so slow. Slow, slow, slower than slow he goes. Hurry, Thomas! Why do you go so slow? Take me to the train show. Go, train, go! But Thomas cannot go. Thomas sees a goat. The goat is on the track. Beep, beep, goes Thomas. Bah, the goat jumps back. Clickety-clack, down the hill. Thomas the tank engine goes faster than fast. Screech! Go the brakes. Thomas goes so slow. Slow, slow, slower than slow he goes. Hurry, Thomas! Why do you go so slow? Take me to the train show. Go, train, go! The tunnel is so dark. Slow, slow, slow. He goes into the dark, dark, dark tunnel and out the other side. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, over a bridge. He was going so fast. He was going so fast, the judge lost her hat. Screech! Go the brakes. Thomas goes slow. Slow, slow, slow he goes. Hurry, Thomas! We're running late, you know. Take me to the train show. Go, train, go! But Thomas must go slow. There is a cow on the track. Moo, moo, goes the cow. Beep, beep, goes Thomas. The cow moves back. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Thomas the tank engine moves faster than fast. Screech! Go the brakes. Thomas goes slow. Slow, slow, slow he goes. Don't stop, Thomas! Go, train, go! Don't stop now! I'm late for the show! But Thomas must go slow. There are logs on the track. The crane engine clears the logs. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Around the logs goes Thomas, faster than fast. There is mud up ahead. The judge wants to go slow. Slow, little engine. Slow, slow, slow. Watch out for the mud. Whoa, train, whoa. But Thomas cannot go slow. Thomas goes faster than fast. Into the mud. Splish, splash. Thomas goes fast. Past a town. Fast, fast. Past a dog. Faster still. Fast at last. Nothing can stop him, nothing at all. No goat, no dark, no cow, no log, no crane, no mud, no town, no dog. This is the fastest that Thomas can go. Screech! Go the brakes. Good job, Thomas. We made it here at last. You are a little engine, but you go so fast. Here comes the judge. The train show begins. There are red trains and blue trains and old trains and new trains and a little blue engine covered in mud. What will the judge say? I like all the trains. You all are such fun, but the muddy little blue train is my favorite one. Thomas and the Piglets. Thomas the tank engine liked to visit Farmer Trotter's farm. He loved seeing the pigs. Oink, oink. The farmer had news. One of his pigs was going to have piglets. He asked Thomas to bring some straw from the next farm. The straw would make a cozy bed for the piglets. But Thomas also wanted to bring a gift for the piglets. What else could he bring? Thomas passed Percy. He was getting milk at the dairy. Thomas asked for some milk for the piglets. Percy was glad to share. Then Thomas saw James at the apple farm. He was getting apples. Thomas asked for apples for the piglets. James was glad to share. Next, Thomas saw some children picking chestnuts. Thomas asked if he could take some nuts for the piglets. The children were glad to share. At last, Thomas got to the next farm. Now he would get straw for the piglets. But Thomas did not have room for the straw. His truck was full of milk, apples, and nuts. Thomas sped back to Trotter's farm. He dropped off the milk, apples, and nuts. Farmer Trotter told Thomas to rush back with the straw. The piglets would be born soon. Soon Thomas came back with lots of soft straw. He was just in time. The farmer opened the barn door. There were the new piglets. They were very sleepy. Farmer Trotter put the straw on the ground. It was soft and warm. The piglets lay down and fell asleep. Farmer Trotter thanked Thomas. He even named one of the piglets Thomas. Hooray! Trouble in the tunnel. Peep, peep! Thomas was going to the mainland. Cranky lifted him onto a raft. Goodbye, called Thomas. The boat sailed to sea. Thomas bobbed behind on the raft. Soon night came. Thomas could not see, but he could hear crack, crash. The chain snapped. Help! Cried Thomas. The boat chugged away. Thomas was all alone. Thomas was scared. The next morning, the raft floated to a far-off island. How would Thomas find his way back to Sodor? Clickety-clack. Thomas rattled around a bend. Then, screech! He stopped. 3 strange engines were in front of him. I'm Bash, said one. I'm Dash, said another. I'm Ferdinand, peeped the last. The new engines said they could help Thomas, but they were silly. They made jokes. They teased Thomas. He huffed away. He puffed up hills. He chuffed past rocks. He raced along the track. Thomas was lost. Now he needed help. Thomas found Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. I need help, said Thomas. Will you tell me how to get home? The engines took Thomas to an old tunnel. This leads to Sodor, they said. They puffed inside. The tunnel was dark. The tracks were twisty. Smash! Crash! Rocks tumbled down. Thomas and the engines were stuck. The engines had a plan. They told Thomas to puff as hard as he could. Puff, puff, puff. Thomas's puffs rose high into the sky. Back on Sodor, Percy wondered where Thomas was. Then he saw 3 puffs. Thomas! Cried Percy. He whooshed away to get help. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Thomas heard something in the tunnel. We'll save you, peeped Percy. The engines from Sodor bashed through the rocks. Thomas was rescued. Hooray! Thomas and Toby. Illustrated by Tommy Stubbs. One sunny morning, Thomas the Tank Engine was happily chugging along his branch line. Being a really useful engine, Thomas had many responsibilities, and it was important that he stayed right on time, pulling Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas started toward the quarry for his first delivery of the day. Thomas was especially careful on one part of his branch line because it ran beside a long stretch of road. Beep, beep! He'd whistle hello to anyone who might be near, so they'd have plenty of time to get out of the way. This late summer morning, as Thomas chugged around a bend, he noticed a policeman standing by the next crossing. Thomas had been close friends with the old constable, who'd recently retired. This must be the new constable, thought Thomas, and he greeted the policeman with a friendly peep peep. But the new constable's reply was far from friendly. Thomas had startled him, and he stopped Thomas in his tracks. My very first day, and already there's trouble? Just who are you, and where do you think you are going? Asked the red-faced policeman. Thomas did his best to explain, but the policeman was not in a mood to listen to an engine. No cowcatcher? Not a single side plate in sight? You shouldn't travel near these public roads. It's too dangerous, he exclaimed as he inspected Thomas. This cannot continue. I must speak with the person in charge. Thomas told him that Sir Topham Hatt, the head of the railway, was on vacation. There was nothing Thomas could say to calm the policeman, and nothing to do until Sir Topham Hatt returned. Troublemaker, muttered the policeman as Thomas chugged sadly away. Sir Topham Hatt was having a much better time than Thomas. He was vacationing with his family on the other side of Sodor. His grandchildren had discovered an old-fashioned steam tram that still gave rides to passengers. The short, sturdy tram's name was Toby. He had cowcatchers, side plates, and a cheery bell that he rang to greet all he met. He traveled with Henrietta, a tram coach whom he considered a good friend, if sometimes fussy friend. Long ago, they were very busy transporting goods and people to the main line, but now almost everyone traveled by cars and buses. Toby and Henrietta spent their days giving tram rides to people on vacation. Being the kind of family who enjoyed railways, the Hatts returned to Toby every day of their vacation for a ride. It didn't take long for Toby to recognize that Sir Topham Hatt was a special passenger. He asked all the right questions and knew just about everything there was to know about trains and trams. What is your name? Asked Sir Topham Hatt as the Hatts took the last tram ride of their vacation. Toby, sir. Thank you, Toby, for a very memorable vacation. Thank you, sir, said Toby politely. Toby thought to himself, this gentleman is a gentleman who knows how to speak to engines. Sadly, a few days later, Toby and Henrietta's line was shut down and they were sent to their sheds. When Sir Topham Hatt returned from vacation, he was informed immediately about Thomas's trouble with the new constable. He remembered Toby. He knew that underneath the chipped paint and rusty spots was a very useful tram engine who could handle the quarry line and the prickly policeman. And there were plenty of other things to keep Thomas occupied as well. Soon, Toby and Henrietta arrived, and they took to their new jobs very quickly. Toby was especially good at making the trucks behave. Thomas noticed this right away, and he was very impressed. He knew firsthand how troublesome those trucks could be. In no time, Thomas and Toby became good friends. James, however, was not at all impressed with Toby. He often met Toby and Henrietta at the junction. Every time he saw them, he made a crack about how dirty they were or how slow they moved. One day, Toby had had enough. Whoosh! Toby cried, blowing out a great burst of steam. Why must you always be so mean? Oh, bother, replied James. I don't have time right now for dirty, slow engines like you. Really splendid, fast engines like myself have lots to do. Off he sped to his next stop, leaving Toby in a cloud of steam. James continued on his route, picking up more and more trucks. He was still a bit cranky and very distracted. As he was traveling down Gordon's Hill, James was so busy thinking of things to say to Toby that he forgot to pin down his brakes. Faster, faster, he flew as the trucks bumped and pushed him down the steep hill, for they love to go fast and make trouble. I've got to stop, screeched James as he pulled on the brakes. But it was no use. James could not slow down. Hooray! Cheered the trucks. And then, crash! James had finally stopped at the bottom of the hill. He'd run straight into 2 tar wagons. What a sticky, dirty mess! A short time later, the breakdown train and all available engines arrived to help with the cleanup. Toby immediately started getting the trucks under control. When he saw James, Toby couldn't resist having a little fun. Is that James? Toby asked innocently. It can't be. James is such a splendid, fast engine. James pretended he didn't hear Toby, and from that day on, James was a lot nicer. Toby knew just about everything when it came to moving trucks. He had many years of experience and a very patient nature. So Sir Topham Hatt asked Toby to coach Mavis, a new diesel engine at the Farquhar quarry. Like most new engines, especially diesels, Mavis thought she knew it all, or at least more than that old-fashioned tram did. She quickly grew bored with moving the trucks at the quarry. More than anything, she wanted to be on the line. One wet but very busy day, Toby asked Mavis to bring the trucks to the line. Mavis was thrilled. Take it slow, he warned. Watch the wet rails, he suggested. Keep an eye on the trucks, he reminded. But Mavis was too excited to pay attention to Toby. As soon as she started on her way, though, she wished she'd listened more closely. The trucks realized she was new at this. The cold autumn rain made the rails extra slick, so they bumped and pushed, and before she knew it, Mavis was stalled right in the middle of a busy crossing. Soon, there were many angry people who needed to get by. Mavis didn't know what to do, and the trucks just laughed at her. She knew that Toby would be angry, and he was. But Toby also remembered that it was Mavis's first time on the line and how tricky those trucks could be. He helped Mavis out of the crossing and promised to spend more time teaching her at the quarry. Toby had been there only a short while, but already his hard work was recognized. Sir Topham Hatt gave both him and Henrietta a long overdue fresh coat of paint and some shiny new parts. And best of all, Toby got a new number of his own. Now he, too, truly was a really useful engine. Toby and Thomas's friendship grew and grew. Thomas especially liked it when he found out that Toby always startled the not-so-cheery policeman with a cheery ring of his bell. King of the Railway, the Lost Crown of Sodor. It was a busy day at Brendam Docks. Thomas and Percy were shunting trucks. One of the trucks bashed into Percy's buffer and tipped over. A crate fell out and split open. Look, peeped Percy. It's a metal man, a robot. Silly, Cranky grumbled. It's a suit of armor, like a knight used to wear. Cranky's right, said Sir Topham Hatt. In the old days, the island of Sodor was ruled by kings. The most beloved was King Godred. He lived in Ulfstead Castle and wore a golden crown. The crown disappeared long ago. Sir Topham Hatt said that the ruins of Ulfstead Castle could be seen on the Earl of Sodor's estate. The next morning, Thomas delivered a crate to the Earl's estate. There he met Millie, the Earl's narrow-gauge engine. If only I had King Godred's golden crown, the Earl said sadly. Over the next few days, Thomas, James, and Percy made many deliveries to the Earl's estate. Thomas saw his friend, Jack the Digger, there. "I'm helping the Earl restore Ulfstead Castle," Jack puffed. "So that's his plan," whistled Thomas. When Thomas, Percy, and James were shunting containers, Thomas saw a flatbed holding a very large crate. The Earl said it was a special delivery for the steamworks. He climbed into Thomas's cab, and the three friends pulled the crate to the steamworks. When they got there, a gantry crane lifted the crate to reveal an old engine named Stephen. His wood was worn, and he had rust holes in his boiler. He hadn't run in years. "Surprise!" the old engine peeped. Victor said that he'd have Stephen fixed up in no time. The Earl told Thomas he had a special job for Stephen, but it's best not to say anything. "I won't say a word," said Thomas. "I promise." Victor worked quickly. Soon Stephen was good as new. "You look really useful again," Thomas peeped. Stephen had told the engines about his early days. "I worked so fast, they called me the Rocket," he said. But what job would he do now? As the others rolled away to work, Thomas saw that Stephen looked sad. So Thomas broke his promise and told Stephen that the Earl had a special job for him. Stephen was very excited. Thomas, James, and Percy steamed to the Earl's estate. Inside the castle walls, they were amazed to see a giant platform on rails. The Earl called it the Traveler. "You three will move the Traveler into place for the men. You must be careful to keep the platform stable." Meanwhile, Stephen wanted to know about his special job, so he rolled off to Brendam Docks. "There's no work here for an old engine like you," Cranky said. Next, Stephen went to Blue Mountain Quarry. "We can always use help," Luke peeped, but the trucks Stephen tried to pull were too heavy. He steamed and strained, but they wouldn't move. "When I worked in a mine, the trucks weren't this heavy," said Stephen. "Aren't there any mines around here?" Scarlowi told him there was an old mine near the castle ruins. "I don't think anyone works there now," he said. Stephen found the entrance to the abandoned mine. He sighed. "There's no job on this island for me." Nearby, Thomas was working with the troublesome trucks. Suddenly, the truck slipped loose and roared down the hill, right towards Stephen. Stephen had no choice but to push into the mine. His funnel hit the roof and fell off. Rocks crashed down behind him, sealing up the entrance. Stephen searched for a way out. He crept around dark bends and through empty tunnels, but the tracks just went in circles. The only thing he found was an old wooden crate. Thomas and Percy searched for Stephen at the entrance to the old mine. Thomas saw something familiar lying on the ground. It was Stephen's funnel. Thomas chuffed away to get Jack the Digger. Jack cleared the mine entrance and Thomas raced in. "Stephen! Stephen!" he peeped. Stephen heard Thomas, but he was too weak to move or even whistle. Finally, Thomas turned a corner and saw a welcome sight. Thomas pushed Stephen out of the mine. The Earl was there to greet them. "I found a big wooden chest in the mine," Stephen said. "Wonderful," the Earl exclaimed. "But first, we must get you ready for tomorrow. You are an engine with a special job to do." The next day, an excited crowd gathered around Ulfstead Castle. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, engines and coaches," said the Earl. "Let me introduce my special steam engine, Stephen. He and Millie will be happy to show you the grounds." Stephen's new funnel glittered like gold. It reminded Thomas of something. "Stephen found something I thought was lost forever," the Earl said. "King Godred's long-lost crown." Thomas realized what Stephen's funnel looked like. A crown. The engines cheered for Stephen. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he was really useful. And today, he was a king. Thomas and Friends, Easter in Harwick. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. Spring was springing everywhere Thomas went. Each day there were more buds on the trees and more flowers bursting from the ground. Thomas's riders were enjoying spring too. Annie's and Clarabelle's windows were open for the first time in a long while. One morning Sir Topham Hatt came into the yard. "Thomas," he said, "I need Donald and Douglas for some heavy pulling at the harbor, and you will replace them in Harwick for a couple of days to keep things right on time up there." "Yes, sir," Thomas peeped. "That should be a fun adventure." Harwick is a town in the hilly countryside in the northernmost parts of Sodor. As Thomas traveled north, Annie and Clarabelle weren't carrying passengers, but were full of pretty straw baskets. Harwick was chilly, but Thomas's driver assured him it would be warming up soon. The weather should be perfect for the big Easter egg hunt on Saturday. Egg hunt? Asked Thomas. What can eggs hunt for? His driver laughed. Eggs don't do the hunting, Thomas. Children hunt for the colored eggs that will be hidden in the town park. That's what the straw baskets are for, collecting eggs. As promised, each day was warmer as Thomas chugged up and down the tracks around Harwick. And each day, Thomas could see Terence working hard too. Terence's caterpillar treads helped him move around on the steep hills. In a tree near the tracks, Thomas could see a pair of birds, busily building a nest out of twigs and grass. One day, Thomas saw that the birds had found a piece of red ribbon, which gave the nest a cheery bit of color. Now that nest reminds me of James, thought Thomas. The day before the Easter egg hunt, Thomas saw Terence pulling a trailer full of eggs. The eggs had been dyed all the colors of the rainbow. Thomas had never seen eggs in so many colors. Thomas waited for Terence as he drove down the muddy road. As Terence easily turned the corner, he tooted a happy spring hello to Thomas. But the trailer didn't have caterpillar treads like Terence. The curve was sharp. The road was muddy. Oh no! The trailer slowly rolled onto its side. Hundreds of Easter eggs slipped off the trailer and rolled down the hill. They tumbled faster and faster down the grassy slope. Some eggs got stopped by flowers and thick clumps of grass. Some rolled to the edge of a stream. A few eggs made it all the way to the fence around Farmer Dalby's garden. Oh no, cried Terence. How are we ever going to get all of these eggs gathered and into town in time for the Easter egg hunt tomorrow? And then, suddenly, Thomas smiled. I think I have an idea, he said. The next morning, there were many children and their families at the town park. There was the big sign announcing the Easter egg hunt, but there were no baskets, and worse yet, there were no Easter eggs. Just then, Thomas pulled up. Sir Topham Hatt was laughing and smiling. All aboard, he cried. All aboard for a quick trip to the new Easter egg hunt location. And everyone happily boarded Annie and Clarabelle, who had been decorated just for the special day. Soon, everyone was heading out of Harwick towards Mr. Dalby's farm. If we cannot bring the Easter eggs to the children, peeped Thomas, let's bring the children to the Easter eggs. When they reached Dalby's farm, all of the children detrained and stood on the road, waiting for the signal to begin. Sir Topham Hatt started the big hunt. Ready, set, go! And the children were off. They looked everywhere for the brightly colored Easter eggs. They found the eggs in the bushes, and by the stream. Everyone was having fun. Thomas and Sir Topham Hatt watched the children laughing and hunting. Suddenly, Thomas noticed 3 blue eggs in a nest in a tree near the tracks. He was confused. How did those eggs get up in that tree? He asked. Can Easter eggs fly? Sir Topham Hatt laughed. Those aren't Easter eggs, Thomas. Those are robin's eggs. Soon they will hatch and be baby birds. Thomas smiled and sighed. Warmer weather, smiling children, Easter eggs, and baby birds. I can't wait for the rest of spring. Thomas and Friends, Christmas in Wellsworth. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry, illustrated by Richard Courtney. It was 2 days before Christmas. Everywhere Thomas looked, Wellsworth was bustling with preparations. Toby brought shoppers into town. James pulled freight cars full of decorations. And Henry had just delivered a large Christmas tree to the town square. The following night, Wellsworth would have a wonderful Christmas Eve festival. Everyone would gather to watch the lighting of the tree. They'd sing carols and ring bells. Thomas couldn't wait. If only it would snow, he thought. Then everything would be perfect. I'm afraid we won't have a white Christmas this year, Thomas peeped as he looked up at the blue sky. That's okay with me, said Henry. I have so much to do. I don't need a snowstorm now. Thomas loved the snow, even if he had to wear his heavy snowplow. Snow would make the Christmas Eve festival so pretty. Just then, Sir Topham Hatt called to Thomas. I have a message from Lady Hat, he said. She wants to come to the festival, but my car is in the garage for maintenance. I need you to run over to Kelsthorpe to pick her up. Please take Annie and Clarabelle so you can bring my grandchildren as well. Yes, sir, peeped Thomas. Of all the jobs on Sodor, pulling a trainload of children was his favorite. Thomas was soon speeding across Sodor. Everywhere he looked, people were smiling and waving. In Marin, children prepared for a Christmas pageant with real sheep. And as night fell, the festive lights of Rolf's castle shined brightly. The town looked like a magic palace. Thomas arrived in Kelsthorpe. He had made good time and was eager to make the return trip the next day. When Thomas awoke the next morning, the weather had changed. It was cloudy and damp and getting colder by the hour. A chilly fog rolled over the town. Soon, Lady Hat and the children arrived at the station. They climbed aboard Annie and Clarabelle, dressed in their holiday best and carrying boxes of gifts. They couldn't wait to get to Wellsworth and the festival. The fog grew thicker. Thomas chugged away slowly. The cold wind blew, and the tracks were wet and slippery. Thomas's lamp was useless in the fog, and his driver held the throttle tight. They crept along more and more slowly. This isn't very merry weather at all, Thomas peeped. As he rolled past Rolf's castle, Thomas couldn't see the town through the thick fog. He wanted to get to Wellsworth as soon as possible. Thomas knew they had to be careful and go slowly. He hoped they would pass through this bad weather soon. But the bad weather didn't lift, and as it grew later and later, darkness soon added to Thomas's problems. As he climbed toward Kildane, Thomas knew he wouldn't be in Wellsworth in time for the festival. He would miss the tree lighting, and worst of all, he was sure he had ruined Christmas for Sir Topham Hatt and his family. Meanwhile, the people of Wellsworth gathered around the tree in the town square. They lit the festive lights and sang carols, but Sir Topham Hatt was not with them. Sir Topham Hatt waited nervously at the Wellsworth station. There were reports of fog and frost all over the countryside. He checked his watch and worried. I hope everyone is okay, he whispered to himself. Finally, as Thomas chugged over the hills outside Wellsworth, the fog lifted. He could see candles flickering in the windows of homes he passed. The streets of Wellsworth were empty, and even the sight of the great glowing Christmas tree at the center of town didn't cheer Thomas. When they reached the station, Sir Topham Hatt hugged his wife and helped carry the sleeping children off Annie and Clarabelle. And now, we must get these children to bed, said Lady Hat, or Santa Claus will never arrive. Thomas chugged back to the yard, feeling very low indeed. The next morning, the yard was blanketed with beautiful snow. All the engines wished each other Happy Christmas. I'm sorry I missed the festival, Thomas peeped to James. And worst of all, I think I ruined Sir Topham Hatt's holiday. Thomas didn't know that Sir Topham Hatt was standing nearby. Ruined? Said Sir Topham Hatt. You brought my family to me safe and sound. That's the best gift of all. Taking your time in that terrible weather was the right thing to do. Thomas, I'm glad you're such a really careful engine. Thomas was delighted. I am so grateful for my railway, Sir Topham Hatt announced. I'm giving each of you a hopper full of the best coal to thank you for a wonderful year. All the engines tooted happily. And Thomas, at the request of my wife, Annie and Clarabelle will be getting new seat cushions. It's a wonderful Christmas after all, peeped Thomas, and the snow did make everything perfect. James said tomorrow would be perfect. Tomorrow? What's tomorrow? Thomas asked. James laughed. Have you forgotten Boxing Day, Slowcoach? Hooray! I had forgotten, Thomas peeped. More rides for children! Every year, on the day after Christmas, all the engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway roll out to the hospitals all over the island. Free rides and new toys and clothing are given to every child. Boxing Day was beautiful. Thomas, James, and Henry were decorated and loaded with nice things for the children of Sodor. Then they chugged across the countryside. Everywhere the engines went, they were met with cheering. All the children loved their presents and taking rides around the towns to see the lights and decorations. Thomas couldn't have been happier. "James," he called, "what's nicer than a white Christmas?" "What?" asked James. "A white Boxing Day," laughed Thomas. Percy's Chocolate Crunch, and other Thomas the Tank Engine stories. Percy's Chocolate Crunch. Sir Topham Hatt's engines love being shiny and clean. It makes them feel cheerful as they puff across the island of Sodor. Percy often has the dirtiest work to do, but he likes to be clean as well as any other engine. Washdowns are important to Percy. But Sir Topham Hatt had bad news. "Due to a water shortage," he said, "no engine shall have more than one washdown a day. Usefulness before cleanliness," he added, and left. Percy was upset. "I get dirty," he complained. "I need washdowns." "Gordon only does it to feel important." "I am important," Gordon sniffed. "I'm an express engine. You're a pouty puffer, Percy," teased James. "No, I'm not," leashed Percy, and he chuffed away. Percy was loading freight cars at the docks. He was trying extra hard to stay clean, but the troublesome trucks were being naughty. As Percy pushed them under the coal chute, they sang out, "On, on, on," they cried. Percy found himself under the chute, and coal dust flew everywhere. "Oh no," coughed Percy. "I'm filthy." Percy felt awful, but he knew he had to carry on. On the way to Callan Station, the troublesome trucks teased Percy even more. "Clickety-clack, don't look back, dirty Percy's on our track." "Be quiet," Percy snapped. When Percy arrived at Callan Station, he was very upset. "From now on, I am only doing work where I won't get dirty." Harold the helicopter was at Callan Station picking up medical supplies. "Hello, Percy," he called, and he took off, blowing cinders and ashes everywhere. "Not again," cried Percy. "I want a washdown." "Usefulness before cleanliness," reminded his driver. "I want to be useful where I can't get dirty," Percy huffed. "There's a load of sugar going to the chocolate factory," his driver said. "We could take the sugar cars." "Sugar," said Percy. "That's nice and clean." Percy was pleased. Percy didn't know that earlier a leaky freight car had spilled oil on the track. When he approached the chocolate factory, his driver applied the brakes, but Percy's wheels just skidded on the oily rails. "Oh no!" hooted Percy. "Yuck!" he groaned. "I've never been this dirty." He was covered from funnel to firebox in sticky, gooey chocolate. Back at the sheds, everyone thought it was very funny. "You look good enough to eat," Thomas hooted. "Bonbon Percy," teased James. "Chalk ice on wheels," chipped in Henry. "Disgraceful," said Gordon pompously. "Ahem," said a stern-sounding voice. It was Sir Topham Hatt. "You have had a trying day, Percy," he said. "Yes, sir," replied Percy from beneath the chocolate. "But you showed us all that usefulness does come before cleanliness. So," he added, "you shall have your washdown." "Oh, sir!" "And a new coat of paint." Percy just beamed. Salty's Secret. All the engines on the island of Sodor love their work, but sometimes there is too much work. That's when Sir Topham Hatt brings new engines to the island. Salty, the dockyard diesel, is one of these engines. He loves to tell tales of the sea. "We heaved until the old freighter finally caught the tide. Arr, it's good to be useful." Salty is excited about coming to the island of Sodor. Islands are surrounded by the sea. Salty loves the sea. Soon Salty arrived at his new job. "Ahoy, mateys! Salty, pride of the seven seas. I'm a new diesel, and I'm here to give you some help." Bill and Ben didn't think they needed any help, especially from a diesel. "Welcome to Center Island Quarry," Mavis said proudly. Salty looked all around. Everywhere he looked, he saw nothing but rocks. "A quarry?" he cried. "There must be some mistake. I'm a dockyard diesel." "You're a quarry diesel now," Mavis said, and she explained that they had to complete an important job for Sir Topham Hatt. Salty was sad that he wouldn't be working by the sea, but he knew what it meant to be a really useful engine, and he set to work at once. "Ah, well," Salty said, "at least there be trucks." "You'd better mind them," Mavis said. "They can be a bother." "He won't last 5 minutes," said Bill. "Those trucks will trip him up soon enough," said Ben. But to Bill and Ben's surprise, the trucks seemed to give Salty no trouble at all. "Yo-ho-ho and a bucket of prawns, the tiller spins and the captain yawns. Yo-ho-ho and a bucket of prawns, the tiller spins," sang Salty, "and the captain yawns," sang the trucks. Thanks to Salty, Sir Topham Hatt's important job was almost done. Bill and Ben were surprised, and a little jealous. "Here comes Mr. Show-Off," growls Ben. "You have to admit he's got a knack with those trucks," said Mavis. "Driver says he'll bore the bolts off us with his stories," huffed Bill. But Salty didn't say a word. He didn't come near the shed. Mavis was worried. She rolled alongside and asked him what he was doing on his own. "Oh, I thought I might catch a bit of a sea breeze." "You really do miss the sea, don't you?" asked Mavis. "Aye," said Salty. "I do." But Salty knew the quarry work was important. The next day he tried to show Bill and Ben his secret with the trucks. "I like working to a musical rhythm," he said, "and so do the trucks. Why don't you give it a try, me hearties? Here we go, here we go, here we go. No, we don't, no, we don't, no, we don't. But try as they might, Bill and Ben could not move the trucks the way Salty could. Later that day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the quarry. He was surprised to see the job had been completed. "Well done," said Sir Topham Hatt. "It was Salty," said Mavis. "We couldn't have done it without him." "Then I've got a bigger job for you, Salty." "Aye, aye, sir. What kind of quarry is it?" "Quarry?" said Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm sending you to Brendam Docks." "The docks!" Salty exclaimed. "The docks are hard by the sea." "Oh, thank you, sir," he said. "This reminds me of a time in Bimini," and Salty was telling stories again. Salty loves Brendam Docks. He gets more work done than any 3 engines and feels really useful. And only the trucks know his secret. "Yo-ho-ho and a bucket of prawns, the tiller spins and the captain yawns." A bad day for Harold the helicopter. Harold the helicopter loves flying. Up in the bright blue sky over the island of Sodor, he looks out for anyone in distress. Sometimes he delivers the mail. This makes Percy very cross. "The mail run is done. Is there any more? I can deliver it for you in a jiff. That's what friends are for." "Delivering the mail is an engine's job," said Percy grumpily. Percy has many jobs, but carrying the mail is his favorite. It makes him feel really useful. The next morning, Percy was happily pulling the mail train. Must be on time, he chuffed. But up ahead, there was trouble with the signal box. It was broken. The signal engineers did not know how long it would take to fix. Percy had to stop. It's not safe for engines to run without signals, but Percy was very upset. "I'm going to be late," he cried, "and it's not even my fault." Sir Topham Hatt was in his office enjoying his toast and marmalade when he heard the news. "Percy is stuck at a broken signal? Then Harold must take the mail." Poor Percy was still waiting and still upset. The last time he was held up, the mail was given to Harold. "It made me feel like a really useless engine," he sighed. "Well, the mail must arrive on time," said his driver. Just then they heard a familiar sound coming from above. "Hello," said Harold. "Sir Topham Hatt says you need my help. That's what friends are for." "Oh, no," cried Percy. But Sir Topham Hatt had made up his mind. There was nothing Percy could do. Percy's driver helped load the mailbags into Harold's cargo net. "Maybe we should take the mailbags a few at a time," said Harold's pilot. "They're very heavy. I'd have to make too many trips. Then I'd be as slow as Percy." And so they loaded all the mail into Harold's net at once, and the engineer continued to work on the signal. Just as they finished loading, a signal engineer cried out. "It's fixed," he said. "Wait, Harold!" shouted Percy. "I'm ready to go!" But it was too late. Harold had already taken off. Percy watched the mail disappear. He was upset. But then they all heard a strange sound. "Watch out for those trees, Harold!" cried his pilot. "My net is too heavy!" wailed Harold. "Harold is in trouble," Percy cried. "We must try to help him. "Are you all right?" called Percy. "Just get someone to pull me out of this haystack," sputtered Harold, and Percy did, as fast as he could. The next day, Harold's engine was fixed, and he was flying again. Percy was very pleased to see him. "Want to take the mail, Harold?" Percy teased. "I'll stand by with the rescue team." All the engines tooted, and Harold hovered so low that only Percy could hear. "Thanks for getting help to pull me out of the haystack, my friend," he said. "That's all right," said Percy. "That's what friends are for." Thomas's Milkshake Muddle. 3 Thomas and Friends Stories. Photographs by Terry Pallone and Terry Permain. Thomas's Milkshake Muddle. Once a year, the children of Sodor are all invited to a special summer party. There was to be ice cream and cake for everyone. Every engine wanted to be the one to take the children to the party. On the day of the party, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. Thomas hoped that he would be taking the children, but Sir Topham Hatt chose Emily. He had other jobs for Thomas. "Thomas, first you are to go to the dairy to collect milk to make ice cream. Then you must go to the farm on the other side of the island to collect butter for cakes, all in time for the children's party." Thomas set off proudly. When Thomas arrived at the dairy, the manager told him he was to take the milk churns to the ice cream factory. "You have to go very slowly," he told Thomas. So Thomas steamed carefully away. When stopped at a signal, he met Emily. "Hello, slow coach," she whistled. "I'm not being a slow coach," huffed Thomas. "I'm being reliable." "If you were a slow coach," Emily sniffed, "Sir Topham Hatt would have given you my job. I'm fast and reliable. That's why I'm taking the children." Emily looked very pleased with herself. This made Thomas cross. "I can be as fast as you," he huffed. "I'll race you to the next signal." Emily whistled, and she steamed quickly away. Thomas reached after her as fast as his pistons would pump. As he raced along, the milk churns rattled and rocked. They biffed and bashed, and at the next signal, Thomas raced ahead of Emily. Thomas was very pleased. He steamed off for the ice cream factory, but he had completely forgotten about going slowly. The ice cream factory manager was very happy. Thomas had delivered the milk in record time. Now the factory could make ice cream for the party. But when the manager looked into one of the churns, he was very surprised. "This milk is almost butter!" he exclaimed. The factory manager asked Thomas if the churns had rattled around. Thomas looked worried. "If you shake milk for long enough, it turns to butter," he told Thomas. Thomas was very upset. The factory manager was cross. "You must go back to the dairy and get more milk, and remember to go slowly this time," he said sternly. Thomas steamed back to the dairy as fast as he could. When Thomas arrived back at the dairy, Sir Topham Hatt was there. He was very cross. "Thomas, it is nearly time for the party, and you still have not collected the butter from the other side of the island. The children will have no cakes for the party." Thomas felt terrible. Thomas trundled slowly and carefully back to the ice cream factory. He didn't feel reliable. He had let everyone down. When he finally arrived with the milk, the manager told Thomas to take the old churns back to the dairy. But suddenly, Thomas had a better idea. Thomas steamed along with the milk churns even faster than he had before. He huffed up Gordon's Hill and chuffed down to the valley. He raced like a rocket and he whished like the wind. The churns in Thomas's freight cars rattled and rolled. They clanked and crashed and biffed and bashed. Even the cows and sheep looked up to see what the noise was. But Thomas couldn't stop until he got to the bakery. As he arrived, he blew his whistle long and hard. "Beep, beep! I need butter, not milk," cried the baker. He was surprised to see the milk churns. "Look inside the churns," tooted Thomas. The baker couldn't believe his eyes. The almost butter was now butter, enough to make all the cakes for the party. Sir Topham Hatt had heard what Thomas had done. He came to see him. Thomas thought Sir Topham Hatt would be cross. He was very worried. But Sir Topham Hatt smiled. "Thomas, you have saved the children's party," he boomed. "So today, that makes you the most reliable engine on the whole of Sodor." And later, Thomas had his most important job yet, as guest of honor at the children's party. There was lots of ice cream and plenty of cakes. Everyone had a wonderful time. The children cheered for Thomas. Thomas felt very proud. Toby feels left out. It was springtime on the island of Sodor. All the engines were working hard in the sunshine. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt arrived at Tidmouth's sheds. He had some exciting news. The new Sodor Museum opens soon, he announced. Lots of very important people will be coming to the island for the grand opening. What's a museum? Asked Percy. It's a place where they put old things so people can stand and look at them, huffed Gordon. I want you all to look your best, so everyone is to have a repaint. All the engines were very pleased. Later that morning, Toby met James at Knapford Station. Have you heard about the opening of the museum? Puffed James. We're all having a repaint. I shall look wonderful with a brand new coat of red paint. I've not heard about that, said Toby. Why hasn't Sir Topham Hatt told me? You must have been left out, James chuffed, and he steamed away. That night, Toby couldn't sleep. He kept worrying about what James had said. Why hasn't Sir Topham Hatt told me about the museum, he wondered. Why have I been left out? By the next morning, Toby thought he knew the answer. He met Thomas at Abbey Station. Have you heard about the museum? Asked Toby. Yes, puffed Thomas excitedly. We're all being repainted. I'm not, puffed Toby sadly. But I think I know why. I am a very old steam tram. Maybe Sir Topham Hatt has decided to put me inside the museum. Thomas wasn't so sure. Why don't you ask him? Huffed Thomas, helpfully. Toby looked worried. He was frightened of what Sir Topham Hatt might say. Must go, puffed Thomas. Really useful engines are really busy ones. And he chuffed away. Toby thought for a moment. I'll show Sir Topham Hatt that he can't put me in a museum, said Toby. I'll show him I'm a really useful engine. Toby arrived at Tidmouth Sheds. Sir Topham Hatt was talking to Emily. Emily, you must go to the yard for your repaint, said Sir Topham Hatt. Emily was very happy. Another engine must collect your flour, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'll do it, sir, said Toby quickly. Thank you, smiled Sir Topham Hatt. And before he could say anything else, Toby steamed off. He didn't want Sir Topham Hatt to tell him he was going to be put in a museum. Toby waited impatiently at the flour mill. Hurry up, he wished. I must get to the docks as soon as I can. When Toby delivered the flour, he saw Sir Topham Hatt standing on the dockside. He was talking to the dockmaster. Sir Topham Hatt saw Toby. He wanted to speak to him, but Toby steamed off as fast as he could. Later, Toby saw Thomas again. He was pulling Annie and Clarabelle. I'm off for my repaint, chuffed Thomas happily. I can pull Annie and Clarabelle for you, said Toby. Thank you, Toby, tooted Thomas. So Toby pulled Annie and Clarabelle on Thomas's branch line. And while James was getting a shiny new coat of red paint, Toby collected coal cars from the mine for James. And while Percy was having his repaint, Toby shunted freight cars full of stone in the quarry for Percy, even though it was dusty, dirty work. At last, Toby had finished. He was very tired and very dirty. Suddenly, he saw Sir Topham Hatt waiting by the track. Toby still didn't want to speak to Sir Topham Hatt. Quickly, he reversed into a siding and didn't see that a big rock had fallen on the line. Bust my cow-catchers, he cried. Luckily, no one was hurt, but Toby's axle and his cow-catchers were broken. He couldn't move. Sir Topham Hatt hurried over. Why have you been running away from me all day? He asked. I don't want to be put in a museum, Toby said sadly. Why would I do that, Toby? Asked Sir Topham Hatt. Because the museum is full of old things and I'm an old steam tram and I'm not really useful anymore. Sir Topham Hatt smiled. Toby, you may be old, but you are far too useful to be put in the museum. You have worked harder today than any other engine. And as Sodor's only steam tram, I have a very special job for you. First, you will have a special polish. Then you are to take all the visitors to the museum for the grand opening. Toby felt very happy. He let out a great whoosh of steam. I've been trying to tell you that all day, added Sir Topham Hatt. Toby smiled. He felt very silly. So Toby's axle and cow-catchers were repaired, and then he was polished until he looked good as new. On the day of the museum opening, Toby picked up the visitors at the docks and puffed them proudly to the new museum. Toby was proud to be old, and he was even prouder to be the only really useful steam tram on the island of Sodor. Thomas and the new engine. The trains on the island of Sodor keep very busy. There are always lots of jobs to do. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. "A new engine has arrived on the island," he announced. "His name is Neville. You must all make him feel welcome. A happy engine is a useful engine." Later, Thomas was stopped at a signal. The signalman called down to Thomas. "The bridge ahead is unsafe. Thomas, you are to collect a piece of ironwork so the bridge can be repaired." "Yes, sir," huffed Thomas. At the yards, Ari and Bert were with Neville, the new engine. Neville was a steamy, but he had a square body like a diesel. Neville was backing up towards some trucks. "Nearly there," said Ari cheekily. "Nearly there," said Bert naughtily. Then there was trouble. "Watch where you're going, clumsy wheels!" Ari and Bert laughed. Neville looked sad. "It's not your fault if you're a silly steamy," oiled Bert, and they laughed even harder. Thomas arrived at the yards. He could see Ari and Bert laughing with Neville. That must be the new engine, he thought. He must be friends with the Diesels. Thomas arrived at Knapford Station. "Have you seen the new engine yet?" asked James. "Yes," said Thomas, "but we'd better be careful. I saw him at the yards with Ari and Bert. They were laughing together." James was shocked. A steamy friendly with Diesels? As Thomas left, Edward pulled in. "Have you heard about the new engine?" snorted James. And he started to tell Edward all about Neville. Later, Edward was taking on water. He was talking to Percy. "That new steamy Neville is best friends with the Diesels," Edward puffed. "He doesn't want to be with steamies at all." "How do you know?" peeped Percy. "James told me, and Thomas told him," whistled Edward. Later, Percy met Emily at a red signal. "Don't go near Neville, the new engine," he told her. "The Diesels have told him to biff into steamies. Edward told me, James told Edward, and they heard all about it from Thomas." When Thomas arrived at Abbey Station, Sir Topham Hatt was there. "Thomas, you must warn all engines not to cross the bridge until it's repaired," he boomed. Thomas felt proud. It was a very useful job. Just then he heard a whistle. Someone was coming. Thomas had to warn them. It was Neville pulling Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas was shocked. Annie and Clarabelle were his carriages. "Hello," puffed Neville cheerfully. "I'm not talking to you," Thomas huffed crossly. Neville didn't know what he had done. Then Emily pulled in next to Neville. "Hello," said Neville happily. Emily let out a whoosh of steam. "It's no use trying to make friends with me. I know you're going to biff into all the steamies, just like Ari and Bert told you to." Thomas was surprised, but the station master blew his whistle, and Neville puffed sadly away. "Where did you hear that Neville is going to biff into all the steamies?" Thomas asked Emily. "Don't you know?" Emily whistled. "Percy told me, Edward told Percy, James told Edward, and you told James," huffed Emily. "But I only said to James that I'd seen Neville with Ari and Bert." Then Toby arrived. "Have you heard about Neville, the new engine?" he puffed. "Henry saw Ari and Bert be horrible to him at the yards." Emily looked shocked. Thomas couldn't believe it. Neville wasn't friends with the Diesels after all. "Where was Neville going?" Emily tooted. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. "Neville's heading for the broken bridge! I must stop him!" Neville was speeding through the countryside as fast as he could. Suddenly, Neville saw a barrier on the track. He slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. Neville was in terrible trouble. He was on the broken end of the bridge. Thomas knew it was all his fault. Suddenly, he had an idea. Thomas steamed slowly and carefully onto the bridge. He gently bumped Clarabelle and was coupled up. Thomas was very scared. Slowly and steadily, he began to pull Neville back from the edge. The bridge made a creaking noise. Thomas knew he must hurry. He pulled as hard as he could, and with one big puff, he pulled Neville's wheels off the bridge. Thomas had done it. He had saved Neville and Annie and Clarabelle. "Thank you," whistled Neville. "I should have warned you," puffed Thomas, "but I was too busy believing silly stories. I thought you didn't like steamies, but now I know I was wrong." Thomas gave Neville a long, friendly toot toot. Neville was very happy. At last he knew he had a good friend in Thomas. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe